What's up everyone? Welcome to today's video where we're going to look at a show called Ancient Empires on what is now called the Real History Channel, as opposed to what it was called before as just the History Channel. Now we're going to look at a couple of clips, mostly about Cleopatra's death, what these experts have to say to see if they're actually giving us real history. And after we take a look at this, we're going to go to the actual sources ourselves in Latin and Greek, ancient Greek, to see what exactly was said about Cleopatra's death and if these experts in this show on a Real History Channel are actually telling us the truth.
That's when she decides that she will commit suicide.
Don't forget, this lady is a classicist who was also on the Netflix show about Cleopatra, and this is what she had to say about it.
My grandmother was the inspiration. Today we learned about Cleopatra, and I remember clear as day her saying to me, "Shali, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black."
What the fuck? So that's what an expert in classics, Professor Shelley Haley, has to say about Cleopatra in the Netflix show. Just saying, that's the Netflix show when they wanted to make Cleopatra black, even though she's Macedonian Greek. This is the level of standards that we have for classics professors these days, saying that her grandmother told her, don't listen to what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black. So that's this lady. So I don't know if I'm going to trust her based on what she said in Netflix, but let's see what another professor of classics has to say about Cleopatra's death.
The most likely way for Cleopatra to kill herself is some sort of poison. How that was applied, I think we don't know.
Prudence Jones, author, Cleopatra, the Last Pharaoh. We don't know how it was applied. All right, keep that in mind. I'll just pull up what this person's bio is. So Prudence Jones, Professor, Classics, General Humanities, College of Humanities, Social Sciences, Bachelor's Wesley, Master's Harvard, PhD from Harvard, and you don't know how the poison was applied. So at least someone said it. One account was being bitten by an asp.
Cleopatra, I don't think, would have abandoned herself to a very uncertain end. She was a woman who made crisp decisions, and entrusting your fate to a snake doesn't sound like it would have been among them.
So now we have another author who's on this show about real history of Cleopatra and her death. Her name is Stacy Schiff. Now, what is she? She's a Pulitzer Prize winner. Wow. One of President Obama's favorite books of the year, 2022, Cleopatra, A Life. That was back in 2010. What did she have to say?
Cleopatra, I don't think, would have abandoned herself.
I don't think. That's what her words were, yeah? I don't think.
Uncertain end. She was a woman who made crisp decisions, and entrusting your fate to a snake doesn't sound like it would have been among them.
Uncertain end. Suicide by... well, we'll find out in the ancient sources whether it was a poison or it was a snake. She said she doesn't think that Cleopatra would have done it. Now, that is very interesting coming from someone who these people are using as an expert on a show that is on a channel that's called Real History. Here's an expert saying she doesn't think that would have happened. Well, I can tell you the ancient sources say differently. Like, she's not in the classics world, she's not a philologist, but this is very indicative of what happened to Ammon Hillman, a, well, now renowned classicist, because he went on a Danny Jones show and he said this about what happened when his dissertation was being reviewed.
He told me, take out the chapter on recreational drugs or we're not going to give you the degree. I met with the head of the department and was told, you have to take out the chapter on recreational drugs, and you have to scrub any references to recreational drugs in the rest of the work. And
what?
You're fine. Yeah.
What was your response?
She said the Romans just wouldn't do such a thing. This is the head of the department. And by that time, I had seen so much stuff that the Romans were doing.
So just like we saw there with Ammon Hillman saying the head of his department said the Romans just wouldn't do such a thing, talking about the use of drugs in ancient Rome. This lady, Stacy Schiff, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning writer on a show about Cleopatra's death, talking about real history, doesn't know the sources and is claiming things based on zero evidence. This is indicative of mainstream academia and fucking media today, honestly. That's it. They just have random people who just claim things and they don't even check it. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to check it ourselves. We're going to use Strabo and we're also going to use Horace. Firstly, we're going to look at Strabo, born 64 BCE and died after 21 CE. So Cleopatra was around from 69 BC to 30 BC. So Strabo was around the same time as Cleopatra, writing in the same language, ancient Greek. So we're going to take a look at what he has to say in his source. And we're also going to take a look at Horace, who was also born around the time that Cleopatra was alive and lived when Cleopatra was alive. Now, Strabo's source here, you can pull this up. It's on Perseus Tufts. Anyone can go look at this. Just go on to Perseus Tufts and bring up Greek Roman materials and you can see anything. And here's the actual Greek text here. And here's the English. I'll take a look at the English first so you guys can see, and then we'll look at the Greek. Now, Strabo's a geographer, so what he's doing is describing the city of Alexandria. Augustus Caesar distinguished this place because it was here he defeated Antony, Mark Antony, and his party of adherents. He took the city at first onset and compelled Antony to put himself to death, but Cleopatra to surrender herself alive. A short time afterwards, however, she also put an end to her life secretly in prison by the bite of an asp. Strabo says it was the bite of an asp, or, for there are two accounts, he says there are two accounts, and we're going to look at the other one, by the application of a poisonous ointment. In that show, what was a way she could do it? It was by poisoning herself. Now, the way they poisoned in antiquity, in ancient Greece / Egypt, Alexandria, and the ancient Greek-speaking world, we're going to look at it right now. Point out a couple of things. See, Cleopatra, so you can understand. Look, Cleopatra. So I'm not pulling up anything you're not going to understand. Look, Cleopatra. Real key point here we have is aspidos. See, asp, the bite of an asp, or it says here, for there are two accounts, pharmakoi epichristoi. Now that translates in English on here as a poisonous ointment. But let's take a look at what it is in ancient Greek, because pharmakoi comes from the word pharmakon, meaning a drug, whether healing or noxious. So she used a poisonous drug, pharmakoi. That's a poison or a drug, pharmakoi. Pharmakon, pharmakoi, pharmaka. There's so many different variations of it in the ancient sources. You can go check all this yourself on the website. It can also be a cure, but in this case, we're talking about how she died. So we want to talk about it in its context of not a healing medicine, not an enchanted potion or a spell. This is a drug, which is a noxious, deadly drug. Now, how was that applied according to Strabo? She applied it epichristoi, which means, we're going to look at it right now, smeared on. She smeared on the pharmaca, or the pharmakoi in this case, in Strabo's account. She smeared on the pharmaca. Because what is epikristos coming from? Epikristos coming from the verb krio. What they were doing back then was what's called Christing with drugs, as I just showed you in this lexicon. So what Cleopatra did, according to Strabo, according to the account, she used a pharmakoi epikhristoi. She smeared on, rubbed on, applied a poisonous drug, or a harmful, deadly drug. That's what the source says in Strabo. Now we're going to go look at Horace in Latin, but we're just going to look at this one little passage down here that explains the death. So you can see asperas for the asp, and you can say serpents. See, she was holding serpents, the asp. Now, venom, you're going to say, oh, that's snake venom. But we're going to actually look at what it says in the Latin tractere, which is tracto here. So it was to draw, touch, to handle the serpents, to handle the serpents, manage them, wield them, perform with them. Corpus, because it says right here, corpore, so that's show you the body. Any object composed of materials by the senses, the body, substance, the body whether living or lifeless. Flesh of animal bodies, which is very interesting because we know that Cleopatra was Christing. And if you know anything about the mysteries, they were using the flesh of vipers in what's called a theriac, which is a drink. I mean, all the evidence is here in the language, in Latin. Now, con bibere venenum. Now, this one, which is coming from BB, and it says of the liquid drunk. So it means to drink. So when you look at this right here, it means to drink venenum. Now, what is venenum? Origin, like pharmakon. We just looked at pharmakon, and it says it is a drug. Right here, it says she was drinking, and it says a drug right there, number one. A potion juice drug. In a bad sense, it was a drug. A potion that destroys life. A poison, a venom. Now, it says again, magical potion, but we're not talking about magic in that term because she's about to kill herself. So the Latin says she was drinking a deadly drug. And then we have Strabo, which we looked at, which said it was a bite of an asp or it was a deadly drug. Now he says it was Christed, so smeared on. This doesn't say anything about smearing or what would be Christing in Latin. This just says it was a drink of death, basically.
Drug drink.
Two ancient sources I've just pulled up, which talk about Cleopatra's death in similar ways. And these two men were around the same time that Cleopatra lived. So I would rather go with the original sources that say what they say here, and you've seen all that now, over someone who might be a Pulitzer Prize winning author, but says, I don't think she would have done that. I think I'm going to listen to the original sources. So the fact that I've just pulled up the original sources and shown you guys everything that what this text is actually saying through the language that we can see right here, it shows that the people who are supposed to be teaching us or telling us about history, and they're the experts, haven't either read these sources or they have read them, they know them, and they're just not telling us about it. I'm pretty sure it's that they haven't read them because they don't read the original languages. And the people who are classicists who should read these languages and are on these TV shows, they're not doing that. But based on what Ammon Hillman said, even the head of his department in classics said the Romans just wouldn't do such a thing. We know that from Galen, who was a 2nd century physician, he's talking about using drugs ubiquitously in his writings, which is like 22 volumes. And he's a medical physician from the 2nd century. One of the most accomplished of all medical researchers. We know they were using and talking about drugs and how to use them in antiquity. So we have a classical professor saying, I think we don't know how Cleopatra killed herself, applied the poison. We have at least two sources, which I just showed you, from people who were alive at the time Cleopatra was around. A professor of classics is telling you that she doesn't know how it was done. So she either hasn't read Strabo and Horace, or she's read them and is not telling you about them. You make up your mind which one. You see, this just proves Ammon Hillman was right. The people who are supposed to teach classics and are professors of classics, they're saying to us that they don't know the sources, which is a blight on the education system in modern times. Because if a professor doesn't know the sources, then how are they going to be on a TV show talking about stuff they don't know and telling everyone what's real history? You know what? If you thought news was fake, God, wait till you learn more about history. You'll see how fake it is, like these people.